I read this book in 26 minutes and I'm feeling motivated and informed because I better understand national identity, 10, and Mao. So let's get into it. This is 26-minute reads with me, Mya D. And this reading vlog is kind of like my accountability space because in these videos, I share with you my takeaways from my current reading. This is book number 3 of my 26 to 26 reading challenge, where I'm reading 26 minutes per day. So this is more like slow reading rather than speed reading. It's also an investment into myself, a act of love, and a way of providing myself with some consistency in an ever-changing world. And I hope all of that sounds like a good reason for you to join me along in this process by reading along with me and leaving some comments down there in that comment section so that there's an actual dialogue going on. Well, this week I read pages, actually this is the start of a new book. So I actually read from the foreword to page 51 of Skin Color Points by Dr. Niyama McCarthy Brown. And let's get into these takeaways. Takeaway number 1 is natural identity. And on page 31 of the book, we find these words. Considering the context in which many come to know ballet outside of the United States, one can understand how ballet can be recontextualized to affirm national identity, end quote. These words can actually be found in the historical background of women of color in ballet, with the previous quote directly following a section that explains how the National Ballet of China blends ballet with traditional Chinese acrobatic traditions and also, got excited, also martial arts traditions, and uses ballet as a platform to retell traditional stories and elevate national identity. Oddly enough, this information also reminded me of the Romantic era in ballet, which one of the descriptors of that Romantic era are these nods to a national identity, which sometimes manifested in something as simple as wearing costumes that were reflective of a certain region or occupation or so, rather than reflecting monarchy. On page 28 of the book, we are reminded that some of the origins of ballet are nestled within the ethnic dance forms of Europe. And I would imagine, whether this was intentional or not, the inclusion of these ethnic dance forms were a method of conservation, a way of helping these dance forms to be present and to move into the future. This method of conservation creates a hybridization, right? When used in parts of the world outside of the US. The author reminds us, and I quote, in contrast, ballet is often positioned to reify whiteness in the United States, end quote. I'm left to wonder if there's a way that this conservation method could be used within the United States to amplify identities of communities that make up our nation. What are your thoughts? Feel free to drop them in the comments below as we move on to takeaway number 2, which is transportation. In the Ballet and the Color of the Swans, in the 21st Century section of the book, I learned some really great things about the Miami City Ballet and the Joburg Ballet. Joburg being short for Johannesburg Ballet, Johannesburg, South Africa. And the ways that it's using access to increase diversity in the world of ballet. And on page 38, on page 38, we find these words, and I quote, the Miami City Ballet bus makes a 10-year commitment to families accepted into the program when a child is 7 years old, end quote. Miami City Ballet noted that in addition to funds, transportation also created a barrier, and students studying dance, to students studying dance. So in 2015, the Miami City bus was created. And through this, students that are invited into the program get a seat on a bus. And the seat on the bus lasts for 10 years. So it's a 10-year commitment to those students, which is important because this has been said on many different platforms and by many different people. It takes about 10 years to develop a dancer, right? So when we are doing things like providing those 1 year scholarships and a 1 semester scholarship, yes, it is an effort, and people are thankful for those. At the same time, it's not sustainable, right? It doesn't cross that 10 year span. It doesn't give that dancer the sustainability that they need to make it through that time. So students that are accepted in this program receive a seat on that bus that lasts 10 years. And as someone who was a working mom of 4 children in different programs, this is a blessing, because this transportation, how to drop people off when I still have to work, when we still have to work, is a issue that's not always thought about. So I'm thankful that this barrier is being removed, because sometimes the only way to resolve it is to drop whatever you can't fit into your schedule. So providing students with a way to the studio, so they're picked up from satellite locations, providing students with a way to get to that studio for the tenure of their training is a long-term solution. Another place that's providing that long-term solution is Joburg Ballet. And what they're actually doing is bringing instructors to the students, right? So closing that gap in transportation by bringing dancers to the students. The National School for the Arts creates a pipeline for students to progress towards apprenticeship by bringing the instructors into the actual townships. This pipeline creation to the company offers additional solutions to a problem that the nation is looking at. So when they're looking at where we want ballet to be, how we want ballet nestled in our country, this is working to that long-term solution. So why is that, right? It's mentioned earlier. Still getting used to this technology. Sorry for the bumps. We're going to jump back into this. The number of Cuban dancers present in the Joburg Ballet is mentioned earlier, and I believe that is part of the reason why increasing the representation of Black South Africans in ballet is so important. Let's think about implicit messaging, right? Implicit messaging telling us who belongs and who doesn't belong in the space. And sometimes that messaging is relayed via the absence of certain images and visual representation. So there being little to no Black South Africans in the Joburg Ballet has a level of messaging that they are intentionally working to undo, so that people feel like they are welcome. The author also adds, and I quote, "It is notable that nations that have widely embraced ballet without its Eurocentric cultural entrapments have consciously altered the technique to apply to the body types commonly seen in those regions of the world," end quote. So we see this in both the Chinese and within the Cuban methods, this intentional work to alter the technique in a way that allows for the body types in that region to perform it, to this intentional alteration. I'm gonna leave it at that. But it's intentional, and it is sans, meaning minus that Eurocentric cultural entrapment. I feel like this leads to this idea of having visible representation of South Africans in the ballet and various body types in the company sends that messaging that there is space for those dancers, letting those future dancers know that there is space for them. As we step into takeaway number 3, I think it's a great time to remind you that while I have several decades of experience as a dancer, an educator, and curriculum writer, I'm not the know-all be-all for this book. I'm simply providing a space for dialogue so that we can all be better educators for those that are in front of us and coming after us. Takeaway number 3 is Mya. This book is made up of about 13 interviews with various dancers from different parts of the world and in different stages of their career. On page 43, there begins an interview with Lauren Anderson, formerly of the Houston Ballet. And on page 47, we find these words, and I quote, "The movie was based on, I'm sorry, let's try it again. The movie was based out of Houston because Li Kunshen, the dancer, defected from China and came here to Houston," end quote. Anderson is referring to the movie Mao's Last Dance. And this is a title that I've seen before, but this is a movie that I have not watched. And I'm interested in watching it now. And not just because it's mentioned in the book, but because this is a familiar story that I've seen in the West African dance world here in America, where members of national ballets defect and become artists here in the United States. I'm specifically interested in how this dancer's life is both inside of the world of dance and outside of the profession, because what I've seen with some West African artists is that they become pigeonholed, meaning they only have success inside of the dance world, but not as much success in pursuing other careers, which becomes a detriment when they are stepping into their eldership and moving off of the dance floor. But I don't know. What are your thoughts? Let me know in the comments below. If you've seen the movie, do you know someone, or have you experienced defecting from a company and having that success both on and off the dance floor? Let me know in the comments below. I'm always looking for a book, so you can also drop the title of a book or a book emoji, just so that I know that you're here with me. Remember to like and subscribe if you liked this video or found it interesting in any other kind of way. Check out those details. I always leave some wonderful things there. And stay blessed, spread a good word, and I'll see you again soon. Take care.